we copy the palette data. We've got the width and the height of the image here. We've got the file name. The last thing left, I think, is going to be, well, the bounding box. You know what we'll do for that, just to make it a little bit more structured. Just do a little vector2 here. Let's say that that's, what did I make that? I said that was a short, so x, y. I'll just make this a vector2 array of 4. And then, just because it'll be easier, I think, to understand what is being done here if we do it in terms of a vector. So obviously I don't know why I'm putting it in a loop when realistically we can hand roll that. So 0 y 1 is let me think about that. So it's going to be those four, it's going to be top left. So this will be the image width, and then this will be image height, and this will be image width and image height, and this will be right. So that's our bounding box. By default, it'll just go around the entire sprite. That's fine. We'll refine it when we can actually look at it. We have our palette, we have our width, we have our height, we have all of that, and then we just need the image data, which right now obviously is going to be null because we don't want to. Do we want to do I want to return this? No, I don't want to return that. I want to just write this struct out to a file. So, all right. What I do want to do though is I'm just going to write that data from the image because we have that indexed pointer here that I added in last week. We can just write that to the file. So now what we can do is same thing we're doing up here. We're going to create a file. So what is the crazy sopen file sopen s? One too many underscores? Yes. Okay, so sopen s file. We're going to call this temp file sprite file name. I forgot the count. Okay, so now we have our temp, and we're going to replace file extension with temp file. We're going to call it .sprite, and we're going to write the temp file, and then the open flags are going to be the same as above. Just steal those. All right, so we steal that, and then if file greater than or equal to 0. Pretty much we just do write, and we're going to do new sprite. Oh no, file, new sprite, size of new sprite. And then once we have that, we're going to write the buffer, the image buffer. So write file image indexed, and that is just a pointer. Yeah. So, and then what is it? Unsigned characters. So size of unsigned character times image width times image height. So that's our buffer, and then close file, and that should be our sprite, and we can look at the content of that in Fred. Yeah, that looks right. I mean, who knows? We'll see. Oh, well, I'm not actually calling it. That's not going to work. Create sprite image. Where's the name? Oh, it's select image index will give it to us. So file list selected. This is another thing that's not going to work with the ability to change what the lists are, because then that index might not be right. So if it gets if the list gets updated with new files in the folder structure. So all right, for now though, this is good. To do when updating file lists, this will break. Okay, so it's fine. We got that. We have our sprite here. I'm going to click on create sprite. It didn't explode, so that's good. I don't see. I wonder if it created it. Where did it create the file? Or did it not create the file? Oh, damn it. I just said. Where the. Oh, I did that. Damn it. Sorry. I did it under export project, not export sprite. Okay. So where did it create the file? There it is. Okay, so let's pop into Fred and look at the content. All right, so we've got our version number, which is 2 bytes, right? We've got the file name, which is 256 bytes. It's interesting that that's not zeroed out. Oh, okay, no, see, that's the debug code from Microsoft doing the FE afterwards, so that you know that that's supposed to be empty. It's a debugging thing. All right, and then we have our palette. So here are our 4. Wait, did I skip something? No, so that's the palette size, file name, 3, 4. Are those right? I mean, the colors looked right in YYCHR. So let's pull up their palette. That's one thing I got to add to the palette view is the actual numeric values. So what is 08? So 08 is that, and then 2A is going to be that green. That looks good. And then that's 3.8 is that skin tone, and then 3A is that light green. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's the palette. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's our palette value. And then we have our width and our height. So if we look here, what's cool is that it will tell you with the 2 bytes you have selected how big, what the value is, or it should. I thought it did. I thought it showed you what the, or is it only if you, oh yeah, okay, sorry. So if you can choose what the size is that you want to look at in this part of the viewer. You can see an unsigned byte, or if it's in this case they're shorts, so it's 16 by 32, right? So those are our 2 bytes for that. And then we have our bounding box, which gives us our 0, 0, 16, 0, 0, 32, 16 by 32 for a bounding box. That's good. That's what I expected to see. Then we have our reserve 256 bytes that are just padding, essentially, in case we need to add anything, so it doesn't break any older files. Although, you know, if we're going to put in a version code, then we probably don't even need that. We might just get rid of that. Okay, and then there's the 4 bytes for the pointer that we don't use in the file itself, and then there is our file, our actual image data. That seems okay. I don't see any issue with that per se. What I'm going to do is I am going to get rid of this reserved space, just because it's kind of stupid. If we're going to be doing, if we're going to be going through the trouble of including in a version in the file itself, then what's the point of having extra space? I don't know that it's going to cause anything to break, as long as we actually look at the version code. All right, so, oh, well, okay, I could see one case where we might want that, and that's the case of if a newer version comes in and adds that value, adds values into this 256 byte space, when an older version of the asset tool if it were to look at that file, it would skip over those values and still continue to work, whereas with the other way, it would not. It would start reading that extra data as image data, or it would have to stop because it doesn't know what the version is and how to read it, and just give an error, which I don't want to do if we don't have to. So I'm going to leave that, even though initially I was questioning the necessity of it. Okay, so the cool thing is that sprite file shows up here. Obviously, it's not supposed to be loading that as an image. There's a PNG. We create the sprite. It created it. Congratulations. Okay. So now we've got our sprite data written. What I want to handle now is the dynamic loading of the file list. So we need to do 2 things. We want to, first, we would just want to get notifications from the operating system that file system changes occurred. So let me think about that. I can't remember. I remember what it was. I think in monitor file system changes in C#. There's a facility to do. I know there's a way to do it in C++ as well, but file system event handler. No, I don't want it in managed CLI nonsense. File system changes C++. As soon as I see it, I'm going to be like, oh, right, that's what it's called. That's C# file system watcher. Find first change notification, yeah. So this creates a change notification handle that sets up initial change notification filter conditions. Wait on notification handle. Okay, so let's see. That's our filter, and then we get back a handle, and then what do we do? Wait first. Wait on the object. Find next change notification until we're done, and then what? Does it wait for single object? How does that work? How come they don't have a nice example like they did in the next change notification. Change when it's no longer needed. If change occurs after the call to find first notification, but before call to find next change notification, the operating system records the change when the next regular change may satisfy the wait and satisfies a wait for change notification. Fine. I thought that's not what I wanted to do. Let's refine first. A wait on a notification handle succeeds when a change. Okay, yeah, so you're just doing wait for single object. Okay. So this is going to be interesting. So let's go to our Win32 layer. So a couple of things. We have our Acid Tools hook here. We do not have file change currently enabled, but we're going to change that. So file change. Added. Deleted, removed, something like that. I don't know if this is going to be, correct or not. This is just kind of thinking about how, like, if you're doing something in SQL Server, when you do changes, it treats it as an insert and a delete, or a delete and an insert, or whatever, right? I'm sort of thinking that'll be fine, but we'll see. Okay, and then obviously when we initialize the platform, we actually have to pass it a function to do something on that. So wait, right? Because that's the hooks. Yeah. Okay. So this one's going to be different than the other one because we're not going to call it an initialization like we do with load current home. And the reason for that is because load current home is called immediately on initialization to give back the current list of files that are in the home directory when the application loads. What we need to do is we need to give it the hook of file. We gotta create a function to actually handle that. Let's see. Handle file changes, file system item added, file system item removed. I'm differentiating between deleted and removed because we don't really even know that it was deleted or not. It's just that we know it's not there anymore, right? And actually I don't even care. So, okay. I just want to print right now that it got called when it was supposed to. Okay, so handle file changes. That compiles. Okay. So here's the tricky bit. So the process of looking for file system changes, you create a similar to what we did for the find first file. You call find first change notification. You give the information about what it is you want changes on, and then you wait for changes to come in, and you call find next change over and over again. Find next change notification over and over again until you get a 0 value, which means there are no changes left, I guess. Let's see. Does it say function for 0? Find X returns successfully. The application can wait for notification. Oh, I see. Using the wait function. Okay, so you don't just call it over and over again. You call it every time the wait function succeeds. So, but we want to do that in a thread somewhere, right? We don't want to be... so we could be calling something in this loop, right, to essentially handle checking for file system changes every time we loop through the GUI, right? And in some ways that's fine, but that in other ways it's not as good, because then this code, we're dependent on making sure that this code is always calling that function properly, and I prefer to just have that handled by the platform code, platform specific code, where we don't even care about checking for that. It may be that it's some magical process that's totally different or outside the control of our application that is notifying us of file system changes. I really don't even care about it in here, other than that we're smart about how we're handling file system access or the file list access, because we don't want to run into race conditions or issues accessing data in parallel threads where then it causes a crash. So kind of think we just create a thread here that just does that check, essentially. Basically sits and waits for file system changes, notifies the main execution thread of those changes, and then I mean the upside of not doing it in a thread would be that obviously we don't have to worry about race conditions where we're accessing the file list while it's being updated. But I don't know, from the perspective of keeping things separated, I prefer to have this totally separated in its own thing that's being done in the platform layer. Not that I've been like super fastidious about keeping things out of this file that won't work on other operating systems. Like these file system calls, I'm almost 100% sure won't work properly on Mac OS, just because of the way that they've been changed over time, and Visual Studio gives you warnings and stuff like that, and I think that's not great, but they're relatively small compared to things like the entire file system access, file listing and updating set of code. So I don't know, we'll see. Like with all of this, it may have to be changed or rewritten just because I made a mistake, but that's okay. All right, so that said, I'm going to add, just for the sake of tidiness, we're going to add platform shutdown. That will clean up threads and handles and whatnot. Not that it technically should need to, just because at that point our application is going away, and so it will technically get cleaned up by the operating system anyway. But yeah, all right. You know what? I'm gonna leave it out. I'm gonna leave it out. Feels sloppy, but why make the user wait any longer than they have to close the application when the operating system, like I said, technically should handle all of that stuff. It should be getting rid of the file system change handles and all of that other stuff, right? Okay. So what we need to do is we need to create our thread handler. So create thread. Yeah, we don't care anything about any of this stuff. We're just going to use the defaults. The only thing I care about is LP thread start routine, because I don't remember I always forget what the syntax, not the syntax, the parameters are. I think it just takes a void pointer, but I don't remember if it's yeah, it's dword win API. Okay, so dword win API monitor home directory void pointer param exit thread. Not that we're going to, because it's going to sit and loop. So monitor home directory. What are the other? Oh, I hate that IntelliSense breaks because of that. So we do want to pass the current home direct. No, we don't need to, because we can just put. Okay, never mind. We don't need anything about that. The creation flags. I think we probably are okay with 0, but it's there's specifically ones for starting the thread immediately on it's 0. Okay, I thought that's what I remembered, but just want to make sure. And then the only other thing is thread ID, and that returns. Does that return a handle or what? Yeah, right. And that's dword thread ID. You have to get that. That has to be set. What's wrong with this? Dword. Oh, yeah, it doesn't need pointer. Close handle, thread handle, because we don't need that. We just want to spawn the thread and let it run and let it do its own thing. So we're going to run essentially indefinitely. How do you get the current directory? What is that? It's like, where was it? It was right in this call, wasn't it? Am I just going based on find first file, find file data, current content? Where's file data being configured? Current content, file system item. Not initializing into anything. Okay. Well, you do need the. Oh, get current directory. Oh, because okay, yeah, because I'm doing that to get to populate the full path name. So okay. All right. When we start out here, get current directory A. Max file folder name. Home dir folder. Home dir folder. Max file folder name equals 0. Okay, so that's fine. It's going to get that, and then find first change notification A. Yep, and the path is home dir folder. Watch subtrees. I'm going to say no for now because we don't really, I don't think we care about the subtrees right now. Dword notify filter. So let's take a look at that notify filter and see what the actual filters are. So they're going to, that's what's going to tell it what we're interested in getting notifications on. So change file notify, change file name, change directory name I don't care about, change attributes I don't care about, change size I don't care about, change last write I don't care about, change security. So just file name, right? Yeah, I think that'll notify us on if new files are added also, but we'll test that out just to confirm. And then, oh wait, we need to get that handle. Final wait handle. If this is no, let's just let's probably return here and exit thread. Brilliant. All right. Probably just print something here too. Couldn't allocate find first change notification handle. Can we get the error number from this? If it fails, get last error. You can always look that up. Okay. So that's exit thread. We're in there. Okay, so now wait for single object. We want to wait for file wait handle. All right, so put in. I don't want to do the. You can tell it to wait forever. I'm kind of thinking we want to wait for less than forever, just in case. We need to end up doing something in here. There's no real harm in that. So let's say we wait for 60 seconds. And then if this is, what is it, wait timeout? It doesn't equal wait for single object. So wait timeout is that the wait process timed out because the 60 seconds elapsed. So now this would mean that a file change has occurred. So fine, let's get that information, but we're not going to really act on it yet. First, I just want to make sure that find next change notification. I just want to make sure that it that we can actually get that notification properly. Find first change notification function. Find next change notification. After that succeeds, we can wait for notification change using wait functions. Is there read? There's read directory changes. Is it read file changes? Read file changes. Oh man, come on, Microsoft. I wish it wouldn't do that. Read file changes. Of course, I can't spell. You change file. How do I know what actually changed? So when I do find next, it's with the handle. It returns a Boolean. I assume that I've got to actually call something to get the actual change data. Read directory changes. Retrieves information to describe changes within a specific directory. Is this gonna work for the files too? Find next file. Next file. No. So directory management reference. Let's see if we can find first change, find next change, get current directory, read directory changes, find first change. Retrieves information that describes the changes within the specified directory, which can include extended information of the file. I mean, I would think that this is probably what you have to call. A handle to the directory to be monitored. The directory must be opened by file list with the file list directory. But oh, okay. Wait a minute. Did I misremember? Find first change notification. Is this just for a specific file? Find first change notification. Creates change notification handle set initial path name, full path of the directory. No, this is for, it says for the directory. That's weird. Wait functions can monitor. After wait's been satisfied, the application will respond to this condition and continue. For example, okay, so find, oh yeah, find first change notification, and then let's see. So watch the directory, watch the subtree, make valid validation. So wait for multiple objects. Find next, refresh directory. Directory has changed. So it's not giving us what changed. It's just saying that it did change. I mean, that's not terrible. That actually maybe works better because then we just retrieve the entire new list and repopulate it, and then, I mean, I'd prefer to get just notifications of what specifically changed, but I'm not totally against this approach. All right, so that means we just do this. We just say file wait handle, right? And then we say if definitely want to check this, but if system hooks dot file change, then we're going to call it, for now we do null, find, okay, so we do the next one, and then so that should be enough for that. So what we should see is if I do something in this folder, like let's say I'm going to delete these files here, did get 2 notifications, and then if I click on this and I create the sprite, I get a notification. So it is okay. We are getting notifications. That's good. So we've got that working. So now we just need to update the tree. So hopefully we can get that working, and then we'll call it a night. I think maybe. I always say that, and then like 25 minutes or 30 minutes goes past, and we start over, or we start something new, and then it's like a 2-hour and 30-minute stream. All right, so just thinking about how we want to do this, because if we are going to re-query the entire folder structure, which I'm fine with, then what we really want to do is on the asset tool side, we need to change the file list to reference the new list and the new item count. So let's change that signature to essentially be the same thing as current home. It's gonna have to deal with it slightly differently. That's okay. Oh, I don't need the semicolon there. Okay. And then this is obviously not able to call it the way it's calling it right now. Well, it can. That's not a big deal. Okay. So that means then what we want to do is, realistically, we want to move all of this out of load current home, because we want to be able to do the same thing for for the changes. So get current home folder content, I guess you can call it. And current content equals, this is a file, what do they call it, a file system item? File system item pointer, right? And get current home folder content. And then it's all that stuff we wrote before, but instead of it calling the thing in the hook, it's going to return the current file system list. What is the list called? It is called current content. I didn't put a thing here. Dude, this is bad because if we have more than 100 files, we're going to overflow our bounds. I'm not going to deal with that right now. It's simple enough to fix. Just need to fix it. All right. Find close is good. And then current context. Oh, damn it. We also need the number of items. All right. We're going to have to change this to so we're going to pass in the pointer to the value, to the pointer and to the int so that we can set that properly. So file system item pointer requested list, I guess we'll call it. That's a lousy name. File list file count. Right, so we allocate that there. Instead of doing a return, we say file list equals current content. That's fine. Two things we want to do: if file list, if not file list, we should probably do something here. Just return like that. We want to null this just in case. Same thing here, or not file count, right? File count equals 0, just to kind of initialize those before we do anything. All right, so that's good, and then file count is equal to number of items. So that'll be set properly now, and we pass it, and we're good. And we can pretty much copy that stuff and put it into our thread and do that, and then current content, number of items. This feels messy. I'm not crazy about this. I mean, it's not awful to rescan the whole folder, but at the same point, it'd be nice if we just got the granular changes. I'm not sure that I care enough about it other than to just have sort of an icky feeling about it. And that's the, my professional assessment of the way that that's been coded. Yeah. So let's just, for fun, let's print the number of items so we can see that that's actually getting something useful. So we run that, and we can now, let's see. So we don't need this anymore anyway. We don't need that anymore anyway. Let's delete those. 5. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's right. There should be only that stuff showing up in the list. The rest of the stuff was stuff that we don't actually care about, but if I delete this, then it should go down to 4, and it does. Okay, that's cool. That's not nothing. That's what we were looking for. So, all right. So what are we going to do? So right now, because this is multi-threaded, the problem is that we have a file list that is being accessed by this loop to populate the list of items in our list on the left-hand side. And the current item count is also something that is getting updated. So yeah, this is going to make me change this, because while I wanted it to be multi-threaded, the flip side to that is that we don't have to deal with multi-threading because we just update current home content from a call to the platform layer. Well, alright, so this isn't all for nothing. It's just kind of annoying we have to do it that way. Okay, that's fine. Let's do this. So monitor home directory is going to get changed. We're not going to make that thread anymore. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to do the same kind of stuff here. We're going to, on the initialize, we're going to set up the notification. We're going to check the handle and print a message just in case. We are not going to do the while true, but what we are going to do is have something that we can call, let's see, we'll call it check for file system updates. Why not? File system list item count. And the only reason I'm doing this is because, thinking about this a little bit more, I realized that in order to deal with this multi-threading stuff properly, you have to have use something like a lock around your data structure, which means that you're referencing the locks from the native OS, which means I have to implement a wrapper around the locks of the native OS, and I really don't want to do that. Not because I can't, just because it's messy, and I'm not sure that it's actually buying us anything by doing that. This becomes something that we're going to have available to the Win32 layer that isn't really necessary for anything else. So this becomes, this gets in here, right? And then we're going to use that in our code here when we check for file system updates. So what we're going to do is this, and we're going to paste that there, and we're going to get rid of this whole thread now. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this timeout to be literally 100 milliseconds, and basically we're going to say wait for 100 milliseconds to see if there was a change to the file system. If there wasn't, we just exit out, and there is no change to the list. Otherwise, we are going to create a new list, right? So we're going to do a free on list, and then this is the item count. Yeah, this isn't so bad. This is working out maybe a little bit simpler than I was thinking it would. So we free that list. We should probably check to make sure that the list is actually valid. If not list, return. If not item count, return. If not list. So if if the list itself hasn't been initialized and was passed in, even though the pointer to the list is valid. Yeah, so that's good. We don't need to do this anymore. We don't need to do this anymore because that's not actually valid anymore. So after we do the screen update, we're going to call the platform check for file system updates, and then our current file list gets passed in. And that's actually good because then it's handling the memory management for this. We are not. And then file, what did I call that? It's file, current item count. All right, so what did I mess up here? Yep, certainly did. All right. So now what we should see is if I create the sprite, it should show up in the list. And oh, that's cool. Is that a bug in the UI? I imagine that it is. Where it's not updating the content of the text. What is the file that it was looking for? It is looking for full path of, yeah, so, okay, well, so the good news is it got the new file. The bad news is that it is not updating the item in the list, and it's because the list item's ID is not changing. What we can do is what we've done with other controls, where for stuff that we potentially want to change, even though we don't want the node to go away necessarily, we can just update the text in the node. It's not horrible. It's not great either, but there are worse things we could do. So basically all I'm doing is I'm just going to recopy the the text every time we loop through. Let's go, let me delete that file. Cool, and it went away from our list. And then if I click on that, I actually click, there it is. Why do we have an extra empty node now? That is weird. Okay, I'm gonna have to debug that at some point here, but that's sort of working. That's is it looking current context ID? Is there something where the text is actually empty that it's coming in? I don't know. I'll have to step through that and figure out what got broken there. But that's, I mean, that's seems like it's adding. Oh, maybe it's not resetting the total number of list items. It should be when it comes in and it creates the new list. So this is your, this is the danger of creating your own user interface stuff. Yeah, I guess it should probably be resetting the item count in the list, right? Because we're starting a new one. And even if the nodes are the same, probably want to reset that count. Item count equals 0. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure about this because I am just kind of going off the cuff there, but that seems like that'll work better. Now, okay, it's not letting me select something I shouldn't. That's good. Okay, so if I create the sprite, now we are one item short in the list, or in the count, I should say. In fact, okay, so it's the selected one went away. All right, I'll have to debug this a little bit later, but I suspect it's to do with the way that I'm handling the nodes in the tree structure, where something is triggering a false match or something along those lines. So going away, let's see, going away that worked, and then as soon as I add a new one, his PNG is gone. If I remove that, his PNG comes back. I wonder if the list item is getting rendered off the screen accidentally by doing that. One way we could verify that is at render end, or not render end, list end. Well, I guess that doesn't help right now. Let's see. We want to do it when we're actually experiencing that condition. So there's the PNG. I hit create sprite. The sprite pops in, but his PNG disappears. So if I go to this and I look at the current context, right? So there's a current context and the children. Let's see, how many children are listed in there? Child capacity is 10. And then let's take a look at the children. Current context, children 0. Is this his PNG? What is this? This is a list item. Yeah, so it's his PNG. Why? So it's almost like it's there, but it's just not displaying because it's being truncated off the top. Like if I let's see, if I, where does it set the header, the height I should say. So it would set the height, sorry, the Y position here based on, based on the item count, and well, but that should be okay. Oh, but that's, okay. That's why it's only done the first time through, and if the item count changes, right, if the item count changes, that's not going to work. So the problem is that the item count has changed, but we're not changing. Oh, I see. So the new, so the new list item is actually rendering it probably over the old list item, or it's causing these list items to shift in a weird way because we're creating these new list item nodes without updating all of the rest of them. So let me think about that. So should that, I mean, one way to possibly solve it is that you have the list item just get added to the end, but I actually prefer that it comes back in the order that the find file had it in. So would that mean we would need to recalculate the X and Y, the Y coordinate for every list item in the list every time we add a new node? Every time we add a new item? No. That would just... No, we would just need to do that for... Well, yeah. So every time a begin occurs, we would have to recalculate. Based on the position that the list item exists in the list. All right, so what's happening is new list item is being created, but there's an overlap because we're not recalculating where in the list these items fall. So what we need to do is when we do the list item begin, we need to basically cause the well, actually we don't need a new flag. What we need to do is every time a new list item is a list item is put into the list by the call to list item, we have to recalculate the X and Y position based on the current item count, which would increase by 1. And we would do that every time. That's okay. I think that's okay because it's not really that big a deal to recalculate it. For the X, there's nothing to do. It's just the Y, and it's the item height times the item count. What we really want to do, we're not doing anything. Okay, so I can move this out here because we're going to increase the item count, and then we'll say else. If the node was not newly created, the only thing we need to do is change the node's y coordinate to this new position potentially based on the number of items that are currently there. If the tree has been refreshed, and then the item count gets incremented regardless because we're iterating through. Yeah, that looks. I think that's right. So let's try that. Need that breakpoint. All right, so there's the sprite. So I'm going to now remove the sprite. It went away. That worked before. That was fine. So now we click on that. We add the new sprite, and bam, awesome. All right, so that was that. So it was just not taking into account the fact that it could change position in the list because well, because we weren't doing that before. We weren't dynamically updating it. So that's cool. So that's so now that we have our sprite structure writing and we're getting our file system changes. So for example, I can now take any PNG that I want. Like I can take this one. Let me open the tool and say, oh, I need to add this to the game. So I'm just going to pop it in there, and you can see it immediately popped into the list. Or if I'm like, yeah, we're not going to use that anymore, and just delete that from the folder. Gone. So that's cool. So now we have the sprite structure. Now we can start on, in the next stream we'll do this, actually taking the sprite structure, being able to draw a bounding box on it by taking the mouse and clicking and dragging a bounding box across the sprite. We may want to support multiple bounding boxes. I don't know. Kind of hesitate to want to do something like that. We have the palette information being saved. We have the data related to the tiles. I don't know that we would export the individual sprites directly. I think we'll probably use this export project button, which doesn't do anything right now. And the reason for that is because the tiles that are generated are sensitive to the fact that there are maybe shifts in position. So this character sprite might get moved to a different position in the overall scheme of tiles in the system, and so then the indexes to the tiles are going to change. Yeah, and then as we work on this, I don't know that we're going to need it for the shooter game, but for the follow-up project, I have a feeling we'll probably need to deal with bank switching. So bank switching is we talked about a little bit but I didn't really go into much detail, so let me cover that real quick. So right now, the NES has the limitation of the CPU. This is our CPU. CPU talks to the cartridge, right? And it sees the program. It sees the program, which is our code for our game. The PPU looks at the char-ROM, which is the graphics for the game. And they're basically wired up to look at these. I mean, they're chips and a real cartridge, but in our game, they're just regions of data. And the amount of data it can read on the CPU and the PPU is fixed. So if you fill up the space, there's no more room for graphics, right? And where bank switching comes in is with mappers. So what a mapper is you have a device that sits between the CPU and the PPU on the cartridge. Actually, I should draw that on the cartridge to make this an accurate representation. Sits on the cartridge, and it intercepts essentially the requests from the CPU and the PPU on the pins that are coming in to the cartridge, and passing the data along from the prog-ROM and the char-ROM. But it also can listen in on a few special writes that you can do in memory on the CPU side, and what the different mappers do. Write mapper in here. Is they have the ability to access more ROM and sometimes RAM than what the CPU actually has access to. So you might actually have two. I keep doing that. Two prog-ROM banks on your cartridge because you wrote something super complex that requires a lot of code, and your mapper can be made using the special write to memory. It can be made so to stop referencing this prog-ROM and actually reference this one up here. Same thing with the char-ROM. It can be redirected to, maybe you have a second bank here of graphics that are totally different. Or what some people do, which is really cool, is they use this bank switching to create animation. So the content of their char-ROM is pretty similar across these two different banks. But what they do is they flip-flop within a specific amount of time between the char-ROM so that they can achieve simple animations like, if you've ever seen, grass, just like a 2-frame animation of grass just kind of waving in the wind, right? They can do that by just flipping back and forth between the char-ROM banks. Not that you necessarily would, but like you can envision where it's almost like just like a flip book, right? Where you have these different frames, so you could iterate between tiles here and tiles here, and if you want, and it's I believe much faster to do bank switching than it would be to do something like loading the image data into work RAM that the PPU can access, because some of the mappers do allow on the board you have what's called char RAM, where you can actually write tiles into RAM for the PPU to view. So then you can like mix and match tiles dynamically depending on what's loaded on the screen. Now that's how the Game Boy Advance works, just out of the box, right? Like the system supports you writing tiles dynamically to memory from your cartridge, And the benefit of that, obviously, is that it's a lot less rigid because you just take your tiles that you need for whatever you're displaying on the screen, and you load that into your video RAM, and then you refer to those tiles accordingly. The flip side is that if you don't need to do complicated graphic stuff on your game, you don't have to do bank switching, which means that you don't have to do any sort of char RAM stuff, which means you don't have to load that data from your cartridge into the char RAM. Which means that, you know, the PPU just has what it has. So it's, you know, it's trade-offs, and it depends on how big your game is and what you need to do with it. So, yeah, that's where we're at right now. So, I'd like to get this so that we can, like I said, at the very least, export the basic information about the sprite, the size, the tiles, the bounding boxes. I want to be able to do that for the ship and the flyby. I want to start adding new entities. I want to start doing things where we say, okay, we have these things that we are going to export for the project. You know, are we going to be able to display all of them at once because of the limitations of the palette, right? We can only have 4 of these 4 color palettes in use for the sprites at any given time, and for the background as well. In the background, it's more complicated because not only is it the four color palettes, but it's, you know, what combination of those can you use based on the attribute information about the tiles that you're displaying. And we haven't even touched anything about level building in the tool yet. You know, I talked about in previous streams about how I was thinking that the actual levels for the game, since it's a shooter where you're moving continuously, you know, making it essentially stream the data for the tiles in while you're moving, based on simple, essentially like a compressed countdown format where you only have to specify the tiles that you want loaded at the time that you want them loaded, and the time is actually calculated similar to, you know, some sort of serial format that you might encounter, like MIDI or something like that, where the stored information is temporal rather than spatial to some extent. So it would basically say, okay, at this point in time, just load across the screen these tiles that we need, or spawn this enemy, or whatever the case may be. And that's going to be pretty efficient, I think, in terms of storage overall, but I don't know how that's going to work in terms of gameplay. Part of what I've been thinking about with this is that even though I want this to be simple, I want the mechanic of the game to be something a little bit more elaborate than just, you know, shoot a ton of crap, right? Like, you know, there are the bullet hell shooters and stuff like that, where there's just like a ton of stuff flying at you, and I wanted to do something different. I haven't quite figured out what that is yet, but hopefully within the next couple of streams, as we finish up this tool, I will, because that's going to dictate what we need to work on a little bit more. We don't need to build a full 2D tile mapping interface if we're not going to use that to build levels in this, and vice versa. If I want to be able to build a fully laid out, you know, map that I can scroll up and down in this, then I need to be able to build that. If that's what we're going to load, then I need to be able to build that in this tool. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's where we are right now. Anybody have any questions before I wrap up for the evening? I think I'm done for now. We'll continue on Monday at 9 Eastern, like we have been, and yeah. we lose an extra file, or did I actually delete that? 1, 2, 3. Oh yeah, I did delete it. Okay, well that's cool. And ultimately when we export the project, it'll actually generate, like we were talking about earlier, the includable files. We'll have a project file that we include here in this, and then the cool thing will hopefully be that once we got that working, anytime we update anything in the asset tool, we hit export, it will generate the exported data, and we just copy it over to here, and then we run the game, and it's got the updated data, and we don't have to do major changes to the to the engine itself. So yeah, I think that's it for now. So I'm gonna wrap it for today. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, you can always reach me on Twitter at Clarivis. I'm also on Nintendo Age. I'm on the Nintendo Age Discord, and all of these recordings get posted on YouTube, so you can leave a comment there. I try to answer pretty quick, so let me know what you thought, and I will see you Monday. Have a great weekend. Take care.